Welcome back to the ZERT Coffee and Chaos podcast, the show where we talk about anything and everything relating to what it means to be a survivalist and a prepared individual in today's society. I'm your host, Chris Bartagone, ZP002. Back with me on the show today, Paul Taylor, Mr. X. Paul, welcome back to the show, man.
Thanks for having me again.
Again. Paul's feeling a little under the weather today, but as a true warrior who does not back down in the face of adversity, he is here on the show to talk about some cool stuff. So, Paul, summer colds suck, man. So I do not envy that whole situation.
Yeah, there's certain things have changed in my life recently. You know about that stuff. We won't talk about it today.
No,
but I don't know if that stuff's kind of having an effect on my body, but we'll see. But things changing for the good, that is. But
right,
yeah,
yes, folks. Nothing
not good to have
exactly. That's a very cryptic way to leave it, and I don't want to leave our viewers guessing, but I'm sure we'll eventually touch on it. But it's all good things that are happening down there at the Warhorse Tactics compound. So good stuff. But bottom line is Paul's got a dog right now, and he may be allergic to that dog. So it's weird because when he came up here, he had no problems with Stella. So we're hoping it's just a summer cold, but
it is. Stella's not really that hairy, and
no, she is not. She is. She's not
very
a hairy
short-haired,
and she is
quite a pleasant puppy, at least around me.
Yeah, she is. She's pretty awesome. One of these days we'll get her. I'll have to figure out a way that I can rearrange the studio where Stella can be on the show for the entire time. She's currently curled up on the chair behind me here, but y'all can't see that. So, folks, we don't kind of mention it enough in the beginning of the show, but it's always something that we do maybe towards the end or in the middle. I remember to do it, and I'm not one of these these YouTuber guys who do a lot of videos on YouTube. I know that I need to. I've got a bunch of things that are in the queue, and then I start watching them and I hate it, and I have to go back and re-record. But obviously, folks, this show is broadcast on your Spotify and your Apple podcast channels and wherever else you listen to podcasts. So we appreciate that in its audio form, and then in the video form, this is up on YouTube. I know that a lot of times the videos get shared to the state and squadron pages. So that's great. We love seeing the interaction with you guys on here. And I have to say, kind of leading into this, we are broadcast across the globe, and that's obviously ZERT is a global community, but it's reaching people that are outside the ZERT network. And that's basically because during my time in the firearms industry, I was able to meet some people overseas, and, we've been friends for, a decade now. My friend Tatiana over in Belarus, she works in the firearms industry over there. I mean, she used to buy stuff from Dewey Rods, and she was a buyer in that industry. And she just reached out to me recently, obviously commenting on the show. She listens every week. So shout out to Tatiana over in Belarus. Thank you for your continued support. And she says she learns a lot from the topics that we put out on here. So that's awesome to hear. I had another member reach out to me basically saying that he gets the same type of great information from the show. So folks, this is just my way of saying thank you again for listening or watching the show. We appreciate the support. We appreciate the feedback. As always, our shows go out on podcast form, audio podcast form on Thursdays, and the videos usually follow within 48 to 72 hours after that. So folks, thank you.
Yeah. And also in saying that, I listened to one of you guys' videos the other day, or podcast, you and Jamie, and you guys were talking about, and this is kind of where it got me thinking about stuff. And you guys brought up the fact that, a few things that you say is you guys' opinion. Nothing's
Right.
fact here. Nothing's set in stone. So if you guys want to comment and add another opinion,
Right.
go ahead and do that, because, that's a awesome thing about this country is we all have a First Amendment and a Second Amendment, and you guys might bring another thought into the process. And we're going to be talking about stuff today that might, you guys might not agree with everything, or
Right.
kind of my approach when it comes to certain things, or if you have more insight on this topic. Believe me, I don't think that I know everything. I just
No.
bring my
Right.
background and beliefs to the table. And I
Right.
can tell you, how many conversations do we have on a phone where we don't agree with everything?
Of
We were
course.
talking about concealed carry the other day, and
Right.
we don't agree on certain things, but that's the cool thing about a debate. Two
Yeah.
people can, or more than two people can sit here and talk and not necessarily agree, but it might
Right.
open up my eyes to certain things,
Right.
and kind
Right.
of have more of a open mind,
Yeah.
so to speak, which I
The,
think this country needs to have
oh,
more of an open mind.
I agree. I mean, this, when I set out to do this show, it was obviously a form of creating some content on YouTube, but also podcasts seem to be a very popular thing right now. And when we first started doing it, it was just a lot of setting up, and then eventually, like, you just set up to where we are now, right? We start to talk about things, and when we were talking about today's show, you were like, well, what about this? I'm like, well, we kind of just did an episode that will lead us into here. And even the show about the shelter building, there's a part 2 for that, and there's going to be a part 2, I mean, for EDC and just some of the stuff that we're talking about. So it's good that you just brought that up, because we're not sitting here laying out facts. I mean, there are things that we talk about that we do lay out facts about, and that's whether it's history or whatnot. But everyday carry and concealed carry, when talked about on this show by me, is what works for me. It may not work for you, and that's fine. Whatever works for you is the right way. I'm never going to say my way is the right way. Paul's never going to say his way is the right way. What works for you is the right way.
Well, at least it's the right way right now. That doesn't mean that as technology changes, as I have conversations with
Sure.
you, you might teach me
Sure.
something, and I might
Sure.
adjust to
Yep.
make it even better.
Right.
So.
Right. And that goes for what you're doing right now. If you're carrying at 3:00 and that works for you, then it is the right way right now. You may try something else.
I'm
And
not carrying at 3:00 there, buddy. See, you
no,
don't listen to all my
I don't.
conversations.
Well,
Notice this is
I wasn't
this is
meaning.
sig day for me.
Right.
Sig day.
I wasn't saying you as you, Paul Taylor. I was talking to the
Okay.
people out there, out in the world. If
Right.
you are carrying at 3:00, you ZERT Nation, ZERT people listening to the Coffee and Chaos podcast, and it works for you, then it's right for you right now. If you go and you change that up and you choose to go appendix or shoulder holster, whatever the case may be, then that's right
Shoulder
for
holster.
you now.
Well, we'll just
So,
edit that part out,
well,
or
listen,
not. We'll
I
just
mean,
keep it in there.
right. But recently we did a show about situational awareness and kind of reading the room and understanding what that looks like. And that was sparked off of a conversation I had with Amy about her daughter in a Walmart situation where she observed some things that didn't seem right. Her daughter did not. And that kind of jumped into a show that I did with Jamie. And we've brought up OODA loop in the past. Whether you live OODA loop like it's the Bible, whether you just refer to it, whether you just are like, whatever, it's a weird term. There's things that you probably do on a daily basis that you don't even realize you're doing it. But the observe, that kind of covered the observe point of things. And then, today when we were talking about the topic of the day, we were able to connect the dots, so to speak, with this again. And folks, as you know, every week we have a list of topics that we have kind of running, and then somewhere along the way, Jamie will reach out to me, you'll reach out to me, you'll be like, or I'll reach out to you guys and be like, hey, you guys want to record a show this week? And sometimes it's, yep, no problem. And it's then the next 24 hours is, okay, well, what are we going to talk about? And then sometimes it comes off and it happens real quick, like it did today. So today's topic is brought to you by Paul, Mr. X. Paul, what are we talking about today?
Oh, we're going to talk about something that's probably pretty dear to my heart, considering, this is something that whether or not I was in the military or as a civilian or a retiree, or however you want to look at me, I think it's a very important aspect, something that we need to, something that we do deal with, but we need to understand, and we need to accept that we need to have on a daily basis. And that's operational security, OPSEC. So something that is, I don't want to say it's constantly on my mind, not like a paranoid state, but it's kind of like it's back. Like, I think you need to constantly have it in your head, in the background. And that's part of that, that to me is the next phase of that OODA loop process, is dealing with OPSEC. And
when we refer to operational operation, when we in this form, we're not only referring to it in a military aspect, right? That's something that we can correlate to your everyday civilian life.
I mean, even in the military, it wasn't just OPSEC to make sure that bad people didn't find out about missions and our future operations. It was a day-to-day thing, even as, we went out in town, like certain things that identified us in certain ways, i.e. like, typical Rangers got a typical, haircut, dressed a certain way, had a typical attitude. So for OPSEC reasons, kind of when you go out and about, you kind of didn't want to portray that, just in case there's people out there that's trying to get you, so on and so on. But there is that threat of homeland, terrorism abroad and terrorism back here. I mean, there are people out here constantly. There's bad people out there trying to do bad things to you. So you need to be aware of that, and kind of be aware and prepare.
Right. And that's what we talked about in that last episode, where, the whole child trafficking situation, like that's real. And this next part, this OPSEC plays into that, right? So if you are aware of your situational, or you're maintaining situational awareness, and you're very aware of your surroundings when you go out, what you're doing for you, whether you're alone, whether you're with your family, whether you're with your kids, whether you're with your friends, the next piece, the OPSEC that we're talking about, is obviously very crucial to what follows after that, because obviously there are more steps in this OODA loop process, but it's just life steps. So understanding some of the things that we're going to talk about today, you may be doing subconsciously without thinking about it. So let's just start with one of the things that you talked about, like it's our digital. What was it you had said on the phone? It was your digital.
I think it's honestly just like situational awareness, or digital awareness,
Digital awareness. Yeah, that was it.
Being aware that there are people out there that's constantly trying to steal our identity, steal our information, still, our funds, our finances, and part of that. And you talked about the OODA loop, and I don't mean to digress or anything, but that, OODA stands for observe, orient, decide, act. And that orient is orienting yourself to a threat or a bad guy. And when you do that, you have to kind of know the threat. You have to get into the head of the threat, know how they act. Whenever I deployed, or whenever we deployed, before we went to Afghanistan or Iraq, they literally gave us a book on Iraq that based some intel years guy before that, some S2 guy, literally collected all this information on the Iraqi, military,
Right.
the, Saddam's, Imperial Guard or whatever they called them back in the day. And I mean, we had all that, and we had to read this stuff. And part of the threat isn't just like bad guys on the ground, but part of the enemy is the terrain that we're going to see, the weather in that area. So we could basically prepare for the entire situation, whether it was physically doing PT or in SF, we had the 18 Fox that was constantly going and reading these intel reports. And it was ongoing because enemy TTPs constantly change. And even though we're not talking about overseas right now in Iraq and Afghanistan, there are threats here in the States. And you can, depending on where you live, and it kind of determines the situation that you're in. I don't have to worry about Crips and Bloods, here,
Right.
where they got to worry about that stuff in California. When you do
Right.
your threat assessment and kind of orient yourself to the conditions of your environment, that threat, you have to consider where you live, your surroundings, the type of threats that you have to deal with in your area. And I think one thing that we all have to deal with is this cyber threat,
Right.
because they're constantly, there are people out there that all they do is sit on this computer and try to hack your entire life and steal your life, and this and that is just crazy. And that's why cell phones and computers have passwords that need to have so many numbers and letters and this, and it's a pain in the butt, but that stuff is there for a reason.
Right. Right. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because I think I was mentioning it to you, but there's a show that we're actually recording. This probably the next show that I'm recording has to do with a cyber attack that just happened. And it's in the news right now, but I don't know that a lot of people are paying attention to it. So we've got something we're doing a little bit of research right now, and I'm seeing if I can get some information from the inside, but it has to do with the automotive industry, and it was a pretty big deal. So, so that being said, go ahead. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
You're okay. Trying to, this is water, by the way. I'm trying to hydrate.
Well, it doesn't have to be water, but
Oh, it needs to be water right now.
Okay.
But no, I think it's, whether it's on a cyber level, my daughter, I think I told you, my daughter the other day got her cell phone stolen.
Yeah.
And it's like, and that's more of a local, thing, but no telling, what information can be gotten to in her cell phone. It seems like we have, all of everything in our lives can be accessible if somebody breaks into some vital piece of some tool that we use.
Right.
And that's the stuff that we have to consider.
And
that's OPSEC. So.
Exactly. And what's good and bad about that is our cell phones are very, very protected. Obviously I'm an Apple user, so you've got a kind of a dual layer security system with your Face ID. And if the Face ID doesn't work, then you have to enter your code. And I don't know if there is a way around that. I haven't experienced that in a minute, so I don't know if there is a way to kind of break through that. You are an Android user, which is the operating system, but I don't know the security, the physical security of those phones, if it is fingerprint, if it is face, whatever the case may be. But what's really scary about that, and kind of where you were going with that, losing your cell phone right now means you lose all of your information. Paul, do you know my phone number?
I don't even know my mom's phone number.
Exactly. Right? Like, exactly. My people that use Apple Pay, that have their bank information in there. You have your emails in there, which most of your information comes through your email, all in there. If somebody gets into that, I mean, it's over. It's over. It's a bad day. And then they've got access to your address, your banking information, your personal information. What can they affect having all of that information at their hands?
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, somebody I get, and I deal with the bank that every time there's some weird charge or something, they'll notify me. And I got some weird charge from like Indonesia.
Oh
Like, yeah,
shit.
this isn't me. So of course it's, I listed it as fraud and it was taken off. And then I have to wait until, a week to get another debit card. But I'm
Right.
sitting there this whole process thinking, how did they get this?
Yep.
Like, I'm glad the bank was there to stop it,
Right.
to stop this charge. And the bank did his part or their part, but it's like, how did it even get to this level? And
Yeah.
that's something that is like, you kind of need to nip in the bud is before, we talk about the OODA loop and, and I look at the OODA loop a little bit different, but you're constantly
Right.
like, to me, the OODA loop is you're trying to get inside the enemies or reset the enemies OODA loop. It's all about counter punching. It's playing chess, not checkers.
Right.
And but I, I'm not doing my part to stay ahead of the game because I'm not aware. I mean, there's, I didn't go through ANOC in the military because everything. I'm not the online thing guy. You know that. Like I'm
Right.
falling behind. My daughter knows more about this stuff, of course, than I do, but that's not, I can call myself old school all I want, but the fact of the matter is there's a process in my steps that I'm not fulfilling because if it was, how did this charge get made? I need to prevent that. That's part of my preventive maintenance, just like a vehicle, is I need to be able to stop that. And I think, when it comes to
Well,
OPSEC, we need to stay one step ahead of the
true, but
bad
I
guys.
don't know. I just don't know if it's actually possible right now.
I don't either.
Um,
That's
for example, like when you go to the gas station, and I learned this from somebody else, and I'll try and pass this knowledge on. When you go to the gas station and you pay at the pump, do you grab a hold of the card reader and yank it and like wiggle it?
Nope, because
Okay.
every time I go to the gas station, I pay cash because I know there's all
Okay.
these fake. I pay cash every time I get gas,
Okay.
just as that safety precaution, because I know that there's little fake card readers in there that people just slap right on the front. So yeah, that's another
Right.
perfect form of OPSEC. So yeah, I know where you're coming from.
Right. So yeah. So, but that's what I'm saying. Like even the act of getting gas. Not a lot of people deal in cash these days. I mean, cash is king, and it should be. But dude, I can't tell you the last time I had cash. The only time I end up with cash in my wallet is if a group of us go out, one person buys, and everyone's like, "Oh, I'll Venmo you this, I'll Venmo you this," or someone's like, "No, here, I've got cash." And then you get the cash for something, and the next thing you know, it's like, "Oh, okay, I've got cash in my wallet." And I hold on to it as long as I can because it's obviously it's great. But yeah, there's some of those things like, protecting yourself, but it is very, very hard because our lives are digital. Unfortunately, we live in a digital world where people are shopping online because it's easier. And the moment you use your credit card, you're toast, which is why I do not use my debit card anymore. It's one thing if your credit card gets hacked fraud wise because it's an easier process. But when your bank account does, again, if you've got $5,000 on a credit card and you use it and it gets hacked and then that money gets, okay, it's only a matter of time. But if you've got, $20,000 in your bank account and your debit card gets hacked, well, hopefully it gets caught fast enough, but I mean, it's not great. We've been dealing with fraud on one of the websites with credit cards, literally people buying stuff and using I've seen 8 credit card attempts. They all failed each time, but 8 different credit cards were attempted. I
Yeah, one of
mean,
my trips to Afghanistan, I went into the Haji little shopette, and I guess they had these little credit card readers that they go up behind you and scan. I didn't have one of those high-speed wallets at the time.
right.
And by the time I literally looked at my bank account information, there were thousands of dollars charged to this credit card. So of course I was overseas. So I had to handle
Wow.
all this stuff overseas.
Oof.
And it just became a pain in the, oh, can you, yeah, the next time I went to that PX, gave everybody the dirty highball.
Yeah.
It's inside stuff. And I'm not trying to
Yeah.
stereotype, but there's the thing is like, if we think about it rationally and just, I'm not paranoid when I go through life thinking, oh, that's a bad guy and that's a bad guy and that's a bad guy. But
well,
you just got to be prepared.
Well, and it's funny you brought that up, because that's something that we've talked about on this show before, where, we don't always want to make it doom and gloom, and you can't live your life in fear. You can't leave the house or your office every day expecting to get into a gunfight, walk into a car accident, or expect a terrorist attack. You can't do that. You can't be prepared for everything all of the time. You can just continually try to stay a step ahead. But again, like I said, you're going to go out with a full kit every time. It's just not going to work.
Well, and that's a good point, because being a step ahead is being aware of OPSEC, being aware of, and that's the whole in OODA loop, the orient phase is being a step ahead of you're not, it's just not a physical orientation.
No,
it's not like I see a bad guy, I turn and orient myself to the bad guy. It's
right.
It's, because that's, you don't need an OODA loop for that.
Right.
Like, it's common sense. It's a mental orientation.
Exactly.
It's based on, their training or their knowledge or their situation, or, where they're coming from, their background, where they grew up. And you can, I was talking about this in a class the other day where we were doing a little section on force, and the amount of information that I can gather in a split second from a bad guy, just by taking a snapshot of them. As soon as somebody comes up with a knife and says, give me your money, what can you gather? You can gather, what their strong hand is, the stuff from their speech, you can just the look in their eyes, like how serious they are.
Right.
There's just so much information, and that's that orientation phase. You're trying to collect as much information to make the right decision. And so on and so on. But that's part of the, and that's part of OPSEC is knowing the fact that there are guys out there that are trying to do a financial or physical harm to you. And there's so many different areas that we talked on the phone about, OPSEC. And one of them, being the gray man. The gray man is OPSEC, because you don't want to go around with a t-shirt that says SIG on it, or a hat that says ZERT all the time, because it's nice to, kind of conduct a little bit of operation security.
Exactly. The ZERT thing is right. Hope, and that's why we talk about everything, but you're 100% right, where your external appearance, whether it's your person, your vehicle, your clothing, and we've talked about this on the show before, tells everybody else a lot about what you might be. And I think we talked about it on a show with Jamie, or if you're wearing the 5'11" get up, or it might have been with you, from toes to your head, with a sling pack and your operator jacket. What are we doing here? And then there's I dress in Hawaiian shirts and shorts and hey dudes, when I go out. Trying to not draw attention. But then I don't know if it was you or Jamie brought out, he's like, but maybe you are drawing attention because of the loud, obnoxious shirt. People are noticing you where you're not really blending in.
Well, I think that has to do with, like, if you're wearing a loud Hawaiian shirt and you're in Hawaii, you're going to blend in.
Well, there you go.
If you're in an area that nobody else is wearing that, like maybe the upper Northeast in the middle of winter, you're probably not going to blend in. So it all has to do with your situational awareness, but that your surroundings. And sometimes, and that's one of the things we were taught. It was funny in at Fort Bragg, and I will always call it Fort Bragg, was you could definitely tell who the old school Green Berets were in Fort Bragg, because they had the cargo pockets and their shirt was tucked in, and they had a Gerber or multi-tool on their belt, and they all wore Rolex watches. You could tell exactly who these. And then the younger guys always wore, Affliction t-shirts and
Oh
tap out
God.
t-shirts, you know, and this and
I mean,
that.
Paul,
So it was easy.
you are dating yourself right
No,
now
I was
because
somewhere in the middle. Well, I don't know what they're wearing now. You saw, I mean, I
please no
retired
affliction.
almost 10 years ago.
Oh my
Are you
God.
telling me they don't make affliction t-shirts
No,
anymore?
I
I
think
don't
they're
know.
done, dude. I think they're
Okay,
done.
well,
Here's the deal.
that's
But so I'm very, like I know I can tell you when that was. I mean, the UFC, just the prime time of UFC, where every Randy Couture, Chuck Liddell loving dude had an affliction t-shirt. I did. They had some hats. This was Florida. This is when I was living in Florida. God, 2008, 9, right around there. So I don't know. I don't know what they're wearing now. Hopefully, definitely not affliction.
well, whatever they're wearing, I think the point is the fact that it's easy to identify somebody that's not the gray man
You're right.
because
You're
they
very
and some people want to be noticed and loud and this and
sure.
that, and you got all these personalities on social media, all
Yep.
these what do they call them? Influencers.
Influencers. Oh
I mean,
yes.
it's absolutely crazy. And there's a time and a place for that, but there's also a time and a place to maybe, I love the sticker on the back of the truck and I know you've seen it. There's a
I've seen them all.
sticker on the back of the truck that says "Come and take it," and then
Oh God.
the very next picture is the rear broken or the rear window that's broken out. Well, somebody came and
Somebody
took it.
came and took it.
You
That's
know?
right. They got it.
So I don't necessarily have to have Glock stickers and SIG stickers all over the back of my vehicle, because if somebody is kind of like really angry at gun owners and I park that car and they see that I went somewhere and they know there's no cameras,
Right.
what am I going to have? A rock through my windshield or,
Right.
or whatever. So,
Right.
and I'm not saying that I'm scared,
No,
or anything, but
it's not that at all. But and there's a fine line, and I think we actually have a show on the schedule to talk about truck guns or car guns. That's a very polarizing subject for some people. I mean, whether you keep them in there, whether you keep them in the vehicle or not. I think the thing that everybody can agree on is if you do keep a firearm in your vehicle, don't put a sticker on your vehicle that says, and basically it tells, I've got a firearm in my vehicle. Like you don't need your SIG sticker, your Glock sticker, your Molon Labe, come and take it. You don't need those if you have it in there. Right. I get it.
and have
It
it
doesn't,
secure.
well, yeah,
There are ways.
it doesn't make you less of a Second Amendment supporter if you don't sticker your vehicle with firearms industry stickers. It just doesn't. But I'm going to throw something up on the screen. Obviously, we've mentioned it a few times. I don't think I've ever showed it, but this is the OODA loop that we are talking about. So this is obviously the observe, orient, decide, and act. You guys can pause it. We're about probably 30 minutes into this. So if you are listening on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcasts, you can find this you can find it on the internet, no problem, but here it is on the video. So if you are watching the video, there it is. But what I like about this one is it gives you a little bit more of a breakdown than just the actual acronym, if you will.
Now, the funny thing about that one is
Yep.
if you read into that a little bit, there's several different OODA loops out there, and that's more oriented to a business plan, businesses, because if you read it, it talks about, like, I think that was developed for a bank because, when you read the orient,
Right. Yeah. How is your bank positioned for the solution? I mean, you
and
can
the cool
take
thing
that
about the cool thing about the OODA loop that a lot of people, there's corporations and businesses that use the OODA loop to stay
Oh yeah.
in front of the competition. Like, they use this form to make sure, and they study their competitors to make sure that they're always coming out with the latest and the greatest, and they're staying, as an ammo company, you're constantly going out there to kind of have the best promotion. You never want to just sit around and copy everybody else's promotion. We talk about this on the
Right.
podcast before. You don't want to be this when there's a new gun that comes out. You don't want to be the second guy that posts a video on the gun. You want to be the first guy that's the video that's going to get all the views and all the attention and all the, I don't know, the algorithms and all that shenanigans.
Yeah. Yeah, you're
But
right.
staying
You're right.
ahead of the game.
Exactly. But one of the other things that you talked about when we were speaking, kind of before the show, was something that, I mean, I know that I used to do it. I don't really use it anymore. I think when social media became a resource for work, for business, it became less fun. And so, I used to post often and a lot. And now I post pictures of my dog and food and, when going camping, that's about it. But one of the things you brought up, which goes right back to OPSEC, is if you're heading to Hawaii on a Monday and you're gone for the week, don't post, I'm at the airport heading to Hawaii on Monday, because now everybody knows that you're gone. And it may not be, one of your friends, but I mean, on your Facebook page, on your social media, how many people are on there that you don't personally know or that you have connected with?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I would like, most of the time when I accept a friend's request on Facebook, it's because I'm friends with 5 of their friends, or so on and so on. And I got to tell you, out of the, couple thousand people that are friends on Facebook, the ones that I actually like know are probably less than half. And like, no, if that
Right.
makes sense.
Right.
So when you disclose that information, and we've talked about this plenty of times, is, I went, on a camping trip a couple weekends ago, and I went and watched motocross races. And yeah, I took a ton of pictures, and there were, beautiful sunsets, and, you get your campsite set up just right. And yeah, take those pictures, post those pictures. But what's the difference between posting those pictures at the beginning of the trip and then just doing a mass post at the end of the trip? Whenever
Right.
you're home, and I'm not, like I said, we're going to say this plenty of times, I'm not paranoid, but considering the fact that, it's very obvious in this community, I have a range, I have guns, and so on and so on. The last thing I want anybody to know around here is that I'm leaving for a couple days,
Right.
posting that's like, yep, going camping for 4 days, house is going to be empty, so on and so on, free game. And you're not saying that directly, but there are bad people out there that might do bad things, and that might not be to you, but Lord forbid I would come home to my front door
Yeah.
and it's broken in, and you know whose fault it is? My fault.
Yep, of course.
Nobody's but my own, just because of OPSEC. And there's 2 situations overseas, and we actually had, whenever I was a ranger, we had a mission that got canceled overseas because somebody's, on their phone calling their girlfriends like, yep, we're going to do this and do that. And hey, people are out there listening, that, how they always say that
Right.
the government's listening, but
Yeah.
when you're overseas and you're on an unsecured phone, and then the same thing on social media, it used to always crack me up when basically people are putting on social media, yep, leaving for 8 months. See everybody, when it's like, dude, you just
Jesus.
gave a unit rotation. And I'm not talking about that on a civilian side, but it's
Right.
almost the same thing.
Yeah. But now, I mean, I'm not saying that obviously that person doesn't have a plan in place, right? They may have somebody living at their house while they're gone. I mean, whether they have whatever that situation is, but again, don't make it easy. Don't make it easy. And if they think it's easy, make it a bad decision when they do show up, because somebody's there and that person is prepared to not let your belongings go missing. But that's just one of the, I guess, one of the things when it comes to protecting what's yours, if you will. You brought up, like, growing up in the town that I grew up in, and I was about to say is what you brought up is locking your door, right? Growing up in a small town where I grew up, we never locked our door. Like, our front door wasn't locked. Granted, we had a garage door, and the garage was locked, but the front door was usually open. So I never had to worry about that. I mean, there's been times where I have forgotten to lock my front door now, and you know, that's a when you start to break that down and you start to think about it a little bit, you're like, oh God, that was probably not a smart idea. Um, we all, like you said, you have firearms in the house. I have firearms in the house. Everything is secure. Another layer of security after you get through the front door, but still, it's you've got to be you've got to be smart with those things and making sure that you don't open yourself up to issues. And that goes a step further. Like in the state of Connecticut, if your house is, I don't think broken into, but if somebody comes into your house and gets access to your firearm and then uses that firearm, you are, as the firearm owner, you are now liable. So I don't, that was a law that it was some kind of safe storage law here in Connecticut. So, but
Yeah, they got the same thing down here,
okay.
and I'm right on the Maryland border, but it's the same thing. It's kind of not where, like, if a child happens
Right.
to find the key to your safe
Yep.
and happens to, you might have it secure, but if it's accessible to a child and they do whatever to find a key, and then they take it to school, or they're out and about, or something happens, or an accident happens, that's on you, because you didn't do your job to secure, there's firearms. So yeah, it's and you brought up a good point, earlier, that all this stuff doesn't basically, it's not going to make sense to everybody. It's not going to apply to everybody, because we're all in different situations. You live in another state. You
Right.
might be sitting here thinking about, wow, I don't have to worry about any of this stuff these guys are talking about. And if you
Right.
live in a crime-free zone, congratulations. I would love to know where that is. I think I'm living in a pretty good area, but that doesn't mean that right across the border, 15 minutes away, and people can hop in their vehicle and travel, and all it takes is one dude. I dated a girl in Savannah, and she lived in a really great neighborhood, and right next to her neighborhood was a not so great neighborhood, and she would get stuff stolen from her car on the street. She couldn't keep a CD in her car, and this was back when people had CD players.
Really?
It's just, oh, it was just horrible. And she lived in a really nice neighborhood, but right next door. So where are criminals going to go? They're going to go, down the street. So, but I grew up in a hometown that it's just like yours. You didn't have to lock your doors.
Right.
I didn't lock the doors to my vehicle. And then all
Right.
of a sudden one day, guess what? We had to start locking our doors, because situations change, and you kind of want to stay ahead of that stuff.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah.
By doing what? By,
Right.
you know, by being aware of your surroundings, and that whole, you know, observation phase on
Right.
the OODA loop, observing your surroundings and what's going on, and making those observations. And then that's leading to deciding and acting.
Right. Now, what so you did, and I put obviously the OODA loop thing back up on the screen. So yes, this is on the Orient side of thing, which is kind of where we're going today. This is more related to a bank, right? But you can take that bank out and you can plug in your own pieces to this. But the one down at the bottom, where are the risk of solving this problem? I don't know if that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's more of a risk if you don't solve the problem, but
Well, I think they're talking about risk management. And I think
sure.
anything that you get into, you have to assess, you have to take in accountability risk management, and, traveling, or,
Right.
what's my limitations? What's the risk here? You
Right.
know, can you afford to do certain things? And that's the big
Yeah.
thing with risk with businesses, is you have a budget. So
Right.
you take all the risk in the world if you can afford it.
Right.
For a firearms owner, can I risk not having insurance? Well, you can risk anything, but
Right.
Lord forbid something happens and you don't have firearms insurance now, or car insurance, or so on and so on. There's that risk management that, thank goodness in the military is anytime we did a mission, we always had, we always looked into to risk management and tried to weigh the pros and the cons. And is this mission actually worth the lives it might cost?
Right.
Where it's funny, and you see all these videos, it's funny. And you might crack up here. I love watching the videos and it's usually like women's classes. Women will be sitting there shooting at a target one-handed, and they have their baby in their other hand.
Oh
And I'm
God.
just like, what? Are you considering risk management here?
Right.
Like, why are you?
I have not seen
And
that video.
oh my, there are so many classes. If Jamie's watching, I guarantee you, he's seen them. I think he's taught a couple. No, I don't think he has.
No, I don't think so.
But
I
it's
do not.
crazy. Like, if people out there aren't, it's like taking a drive. So this is, many, many years ago, I decided to go to the Baltimore Zoo with my family. And I'm like, why do I need to go the whole way around the Beltway when I can just cut straight through Baltimore? It's shorter. Well, cutting straight through Baltimore wasn't the best idea, because what area of Baltimore was I cutting straight through? Like gangland Baltimore. And I really didn't do a proper risk management, whenever I did that, because I wasn't thinking about all, the entire situation, and developed, the situation, looking at terrain. And
Right.
that's part of that enemy, that enemy situation. And it's just one of those things where the more I grew, and thank goodness I was in the situations I was in the military, because it opened my eyes to a lot of stuff. And I think, like, even though you said risk isn't really a factor, I think the more you would think about it, especially being a business owner, you've got to, is the risk worth the reward? And that's everything we do. Is going out and riding motorcycles, dirt bikes all weekend worth the risk of my knees hurting? And so on and so on. There's
Well,
always
right.
a
But
risk, a risk
I
assessment.
think that risk is, it says, like, where are the risks of solving the problem? So I guess it really comes down to what that problem is. And I think that's a great question to ask. Is there a risk in solving a problem? And that's kind of be a rhetorical question. I mean, that's a question I'll ask to everybody, and we would love to hear the answer to that one in the comments below, or obviously on the video, or the actual just audio podcast. Do you think there is a risk in solving a problem? And you can take that and look inward, and what problem are you dealing with in your life right now, and is there a risk in solving it? It's
I
weird
think
that they
the
would.
risk I think the risk might not be solving the problem, but how you solve the problem, how you go
Sure.
through the process of solving the problem,
Yeah.
taking the easy way
Yeah.
to solve it, or taking the hard way, easy financial decisions, or hard ones. I mean, there's
Yeah.
just so many. I mean, we've, I mean, we're not going to get into it, but having the conversations that I've had with you the last couple weeks, I mean, you saw the risks in making certain,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
you know, taking certain opportunities, but
Yep.
sometimes it might take a while, but they always say the risk is worth the reward.
Yeah.
Sometimes if it works out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's something to think about when you get to this point, um, in your journey. What are some of the other OPSEC pieces that you took away, obviously from living this in the military? What are those that you took away that you really employ in your daily life? Like they're part of your everyday kind of situation.
I, it sounds crazy, and it took me a really long time to get, like, talking about my job in the military. Like, I didn't have a 9 to 5 job. Like, my job for 20 years was training, and it wasn't like training to, it was training for combat, like training to kill people. And part of that was constantly mission planning, conducting, operations orders from start to finish.
Right.
And they really, from the beginning to the end, every part of that mission planning was in tuned to uh, maintaining operational security. And it's even they would even break it down to like patrol base activities. When we took a break in the evening,
Yeah.
and and we set up camp and a patrol base, when we left, what did we do? We picked up all of our trash. There was any type, we dispersed fire pits. We did all that stuff to show that the footprint that we had isn't identifying, who we were, our unit, the size of our unit, which direction our unit came from, so on and so on. And I think that kind of leads into, like, and this might, you can say what you want, but, and I see it happening, everywhere, is when I get bills in the mail and I want to throw those bills away, I don't just throw those bills in the trash. All my bills, all my bank statements get burned. I sit
Oh,
there and I wait till they
yeah.
are burned up to make
Yeah.
sure that, I mean, and some people don't have the paper trail anymore. I still do.
Yeah.
But when all my everything that I get in the mail that can have any type of information on it at all.
Gets
And now,
burned.
granted, I live in the country,
Right.
and it's pretty easy. I have 2 burn pits.
Right. Right.
I've
Yeah.
got a big one. I've
Yep.
got a burn barrel that I
Yep.
burn most of my stuff,
Yep.
and then I have the one that everybody hangs out around. We drink bourbon,
Exactly.
smoke cigars.
Oh, I like that. I
Ooh,
like that.
I'm
Man,
just
maybe I'll
letting you know.
maybe I'll get invited to that sometime.
You know how
Um,
many times you've been invited. I don't even want to hear
right. Exactly.
it.
One of the things that you just obviously brought up that is a great point is doing that. So, we all get junk mail, but that junk mail still has information on it. It's still giving you information. So, and what I mean by that is the credit card offers that you get. If you throw those away and somebody opens that up, like, they could get a credit card in your name. And I mean, I don't know if, how viable that is as far as if it's been done, but if you've ever had a hit on your credit and you just not, I mean, that's reality. You could really run into something like that. So it makes sense to burn those, shred them, whatever. If you can shred it, but we've all seen we've all seen an episode of CSI out there where they go through the garbage and they put your shredded paperwork back together. So
Shred it, then burn it. No
shred
chance at
it,
all.
then burn it. Exactly. So well, I mean, I guess they've put burned pieces of paper back together as well. They can do everything on CSI, especially if it's CSI Las Vegas.
I think if you reach the point where somebody's doing that, you might have bigger problems.
Exactly.
You might be, yeah. Anyway.
Well, you never know. So that's something that you do on the daily. Is there anything else that you maintain?
I think another one in this, one of the things we're taught in the military, and I don't even think it's a military thing, but this is where it was instilled in me, is anytime we were done, and this sounds probably corny, anytime we were on the range, anytime we leave an area, we're policing up the area. And part of that policing up the area is that process is leaving the area better off when you left,
Right.
than when you showed up. And I think part of that mental is, and I'm not saying like whenever I leave an area, I do the whole, like, ammonia and clean stuff off and clean my fingerprints off and do all that shenanigans, because I think that's purely Hollywood, and there's no way like I could possibly wipe off all the prints. But some of the stuff that you leave behind, period, whether it's, you go to an amusement park or you throw a receipt away, some of that stuff, like when I go to Walmart and get a receipt, I'll see receipts in trash bags, and it seems like every time everybody's using credit cards.
Yeah.
And sometimes I mean, it doesn't give the entire number, but it's still giving information when you leave this stuff behind.
Yeah.
You know, it's like when it's crazy. Like and I've never done this, but you know, I'm not going to go out and get DNA on, people are constantly driving by here throwing like, beer bottles out. It's like, I'm not going to go collect that up and get a DNA test done. But I've seen where people will like dump their trash on the side of the road, and people will open up their trash,
Oh
and
yeah.
there's, oh, well, guess what? I know whose trash this is because
Yep.
there's their address on a piece of mail, or there's
Right.
something listing their name or
Right.
credit card stuff. So if you always keep in the mindset of leaving someplace better than how you showed up, I
Sure.
think you avoid a lot of these situations just because you're not leaving either a digital footprint or just a footprint
Yeah.
altogether. It's not like we got to worry about like the scene of a crime and, oh, I left a tire track or a
Right.
footprint
Right.
or anything like that. I'm not going that far.
Yeah. But we did a show. I got to go back and look, and I know it was a show that I did with Jamie, and we talked about your digital footprint, and there's a book that I believe we showed on that show, whether we displayed it or whether we put it in the comment section or the description of the show, but there is a book out there on erasing your digital footprint, and it is intensive. And I think we said it then, and I'll say it again. um, it's not something that you need to do, and I think it's a little extreme. If your plan is to just live a cash lifestyle in the woods in a log cabin, and you're not going to have electricity, it's very, very hard to do. And again, the last step is obviously getting rid of your email, because today our lives are connected to this email address. But if you are interested, we'll put the link to that book in the notes in the show description on YouTube. But folks, this has been an hour of us just kind of giving you a little bit top layer, like just the very top layer of this stuff. Every one of these episodes that we do could easily be a 4-hour episode. And I mean, I know that y'all don't have the time to sit there and watch a video or to listen to a podcast for 4 hours. I mean, these people that do this, but we like to just give you a little bit, and then we can always come back for more. That's why we always look for the feedback on the shows, whether it's on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. Any comments, any feedback lets us know when we need to do a deeper dive in the conversations or the topics that we have. So that's kind of, that's the point of all this. So we appreciate your feedback when it comes to these shows, right, Paul?
Yes.
Good.
Did you want any more than that?
No. That's it. Folks, like I just said, it's, we try and keep these close to an hour, so we don't take up too much of your time. If you have a hour drive or a half-hour drive into work, you can catch half of it in the morning and half it on the way home, and before you know it, you are home to your loved ones and getting ready to have a steak and sit back and relax. I know that I said it at the top of the hour, and I'm going to say it again. I really appreciate your tuning in, your support, and your continued support with the episode, and obviously being a member of ZERT. There's some exciting things happening over on the ZERT side. I don't know if it'll be a podcast, but we are going to put out some videos with some new information coming up here soon. So as always, I like to end it with, folks, thank you, and you stay safe out there. Until next time, Paul.
Yeah, I think as a parent, as an instructor, so on and so on, as a family member, as a friend, it's our job to constantly, like it's my job to continually try to protect and always try to make the situation better. And I think part of maintaining operational security is gaining an advantage. It's always keeping one step ahead, and it might not be as much physical protection,
Right.
and but it is a, it is still protection, and that should be, our goal is try to, we always talk about, making our fighting position better.
Yes.
And keeping OPSEC as part of is maintaining and keeping that fighting position better. So
Yes.
I think that's what we're pretty much talking about today.
Very good. Very good. All right, guys. Until next time, don't be somebody's resupply. ZP002 out.
XP 0311 Delta out.
Later, guys.